Hey, this is More Than Velocity. I'm Bart Payer here with Jordan Oseguera and Ryan Croton. And today we've got quite a different guest on board for you. His name's Dale Scott. He's been an MLB umpire for years, and we'd love to just kind of talk with him and figure out, his thoughts about a number of different things. And, before we get started, Dale, it's great to have you on. Why don't you quickly just kind of recap who you are and your career?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here. Yeah, I started umpire when I was 15 in Eugene, Oregon, and really enjoyed it. The reason I started is because I was a horrible player, even though I thought I was going to be the first baseman for the Dodgers. I then, started playing, and that wasn't going to happen. So at 15, I started umpiring. I really enjoyed it, and when I was 21, I went to umpire school, and did well enough there to get a job in the minor leagues, and that was the start of a 37-year career in professional baseball. I spent 5 years in the minor leagues, a couple winters working winter baseball in the Dominican Republic, and then had my first game in the big leagues in 1985, and I was offered a contract in 1986 with the American League, and that was when the leagues had separate staffs, American League and National League. In 2000, they combined the staffs to where we work everybody, but I came up as an American League umpire.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Ryan, you're the one who organized this. I know you have a lot of different things that you wanted to ask Dale around some of the stuff that we normally talk about, but other things just because nobody normally, kind of delves into what it takes to be an umpire and what you're dealing with day in and day out. So Ryan, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah. I kind of want to just keep in the vein of understanding the day in the life of a major league umpire. I mean, so Jordan and I were inside the walls of a team, and I will tell you, we scout you guys. There's a heavy amount of analytics that goes around umpiring tendencies, and but we never really had any interaction with umpires, at least in my area, high performance, and same with Jordan being not on field. Generally, the managers are the ones that are getting in your face.
Right.
But I'm curious, like,
when the pitching coach is getting involved with the umpire, things aren't going well for anybody.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's not a good sign usually.
Yeah. So there's a lot I want to pick your brain, but like, how does it work as far as your lifestyle? Like, are you going to all sorts of? There's 162 games. I mean, right. Are you doing 162 games, or like, how does that work?
No. A major league umpire works full season, but they have 4 weeks that they have off. 4 1-week breaks during the season. And then they're also working replay, which is part of your schedule. And each crew will be in the replay in New York, working replay a minimum of 2 weeks a year. Some crews work 2.5 because they're working the All-Star week. And then other crews work 3 weeks in replay. There's always 2 crews in replay, and there's always 2 crews that are off. So there's 19 crews total in Major League Baseball. And so what happens is we bid on schedules. The crew chiefs 1 through 19, based on crew chief seniority, will get 19 schedules, usually in February or March, and we'll bid on the schedule. And on the schedules from opening day to the last day, it has your weeks off built in. It has the weeks that you're doing replay built in. So you're bidding on the entire season schedule. Obviously, a more senior guy is going to have the first, second, third pick, higher picks, and will pick a schedule that they deem good for them. I mean, for me, I was a West Coast guy, so I always wanted to bid on a schedule that had a lot of West Coast games, and sometimes it would vary quite a bit. I mean, I remember one year there was one schedule that had only 17 games on the West Coast. When I say West Coast, I also include Arizona and Denver. Mm-hmm. And only had 17 games on the West Coast. And that same year, another schedule had 47 dates on the West Coast. Wow. And obviously that, I like that being a West Coast guy, but there are some guys that hated going to the West Coast because they live out in the East and they have a better chance of getting home on off days and stuff. So, that bidding on schedules, there's a lot of different factors of why guys bid on it and whatever, but that's what you do. You bid on a schedule, you get your schedule, and then you just work it. We won't work 162 games. If we're healthy the entire year, nowadays, I think you'll, depending on your replay schedule, you'll work about 125, maybe somewhere in there. That always varies. You work with the crew. I'm the crew chief. I put in 5 names in late December, early January that I would like to work with. They try to match you up with at least one of those guys on your crew, and that's how the crews are formed. And then you just go out and work.
Man, this is so crazy because when I first started working as a major league assistant strength coach, I lived in an apartment building called the Sailcloth Factory in Baltimore, which is around the corner from Babe Ruth's house.
Sure.
But there was an umpire, a major league umpire that was my neighbor, which is kind of weird, but we never really talked. First of all, I was kind of concerned, like if he ever umpired our game and I'm talking about the team, I just didn't want to get into that conversation. Right. But the one thing I noticed is that he was quite regimented in that we had a small little fitness area in this apartment that this guy, like daily, I would see if he was home, he was doing, the Stairmaster, he's working out. I mean, the thing is, like, I wonder what you could tell me, obviously there's a cognitive fatigue element of umpiring, but your body, you're in the crouch, you're holding positions, some of those guys got to run and move around. I mean,
right.
Do you get tired, after games? Are you kind of like, is there a certain part where you're really like, man, I'm whipped?
Oh, absolutely. The plate umpire, different from the base guys. The plate umpire has got all the equipment on, and he's doing basically anywhere from 200 to 300 deep knee bends over the course of a 3-hour game, or whatever. And I mean, my longest game behind the plate, way back in '92, I went 19 innings, 6.5 hours. So
Wow.
it's like, I'm not even sure how many pitches I saw, but way too many, I might add. Yeah, so and we're taught and trained to use our legs and not our back. It's easy. What I see when I teach clinics and stuff and amateur umpires is guys have a tendency to lean or lean down behind the plate, and you need to. It's more like a sit. Using your legs like you're sitting on a chair, because obviously your legs are much stronger than your back, and that's going to help you immensely, especially in those long games. Yeah, you get tired, but if you're leaning all the time, plus you're not seeing the pitch the way you want to see it and that kind of stuff. But I don't want to get in the weeds on that. But yeah, you definitely get tired, and you may work third base, or actually the position you probably move the least is probably first base, only because the way the rotations are and everything. But it's a lot of start and stop. It's there's not a lot of gradual working up to a run or something. Usually the ball's hit, boom, you're going to wherever you have to go, and that kind of stuff. And then physically tired, yeah, also mentally tired, because you're so focused on a game. It's easy to, especially on the bases, especially like, for example, third base. You may not have a call for inning after inning after inning, just nothing that comes up, but you better be ready for one, because all of a sudden you have that fair foul or that check swing or that catch, no catch or whatever, and you better be prepared for it. So it's a mental, for umpires, well, it's for players too, but it's a mental thing where you have to just stay focused every pitch, every play, ready for whatever is going to come about. But I'm telling you, yes, you are tired. Yeah. Especially those day games in July in St. Louis or whatever, where you are. I mean, there were games. I'm a sweater anyway, and with all that equipment, literally there were games where I was soaked. Even my ball bag where I keep the baseballs was damp. Where I'd have to have the ball boy come out and kind of give me fresh balls all the time, because I was the humidity and everything. I was sweating so much. So yeah, you definitely get tired.
Okay, I got one more question, Jordan, then you can take over, because this is exciting for me. When you throw the ball, so you've done the plate?
Or yeah, you work the plate every fourth game.
Okay.
I mean, you rotate
So
every game.
This is a question I have, because you got all these fans, right? You might go and play at a packed house, maybe with the Dodgers. Some of these teams are really well attended. And you got to make a throw back to the pitcher. Is there any level of anxiety there? I've never seen on television an umpire with the yips, but I know a pitcher who's on the mound doesn't want to have to jump or move left or right. I'm just curious, how do you train your arm? What do you do?
You didn't see the yips for me, because the way I threw it was I handed it to the catcher. That's how I threw the ball. Okay, I was told by a minor league supervisor when in the minor leagues. Said you might want to just hand it to the catcher. I think maybe that's probably the best way to. So
you're serious when you're saying you're not going to be the first baseman for the Dodgers growing up.
I am totally serious when I'm
Okay.
telling you that I sucked. Okay. and I've promoting my book this year. I've been asked to throw out a couple of first pitches, and in the last couple of years, the Dodgers and Baltimore and in San Diego, Seattle. It's funny. I had 5 ceremonial first pitches. The count was 3-2. So I had my 6th one was in Seattle, and the pressure was on, right? It was 3-1. I threw a strike in San Diego. So now here we go, 3-2. And I'm thinking, and I'm telling people I got to throw a strike here. I'm having fun with it. And I bounced it. I mean, it was horrible. It was I'm right in my backyard here in
Going
Portland,
for the
in
chase,
Seattle.
going for chase.
I mean, I walked him. I probably hit him, frankly, but yeah, I have a terrible arm. Now there are some guys that are very athletic and they whip the ball there. A lot of catchers like to throw the ball back. They would rather throw the ball back, either just because of habit or superstition or whatever. But yeah, for the most part, I just handed the ball to the catcher because I know my limitations.
All right, Jordan, fire away, man.
I mean, the big question I have, and again, this is just one of my going through the minor leagues, coaching, all that stuff. I would also, from when I coached in college, I'd run into the same umpires that I had in college in the minor leagues. And kind of when I got into coaching in professional baseball, how do they move umpires up? What are the qualifications for that? Because like when we would sometimes get into those postseason things, there's a couple umpire crews that I got pretty close to when we get these rain delays. We're all stuck in a tunnel in the Arizona League or, whatever it is. And they're coming in trying to figure out what we're doing for the rain delays in high A, double A, places like that. And the guys are like, yeah, I didn't get picked to go to the postseason. They said I didn't meet the qualifications. Like, you're one of the best guys in the league. Why are you not in there? What are those qualifications that they're evaluating umpires on? I've never really known, and I've always kind of wondered.
Well, it's an overall thing. I mean, in the big leagues, you are evaluated on practically everything you do. I mean, every umpire is evaluated on every single pitch that you called that season. You're evaluated on every call on the bases or the plate that you've had that season. And you're evaluated sometimes on calls you didn't make, but should have. For example, an obstruction that you didn't call or something like that, or an interference. The supervisors are either in-house, at the ball, because they travel around and they're at the ballpark, or there's the video evaluations. Obviously your score on your plate work comes in after every plate game. And all of that data and all that information is available to them in early September when they start formulating who's going to be working postseason. There's 76 umpires, full-time umpires on staff. This may not be the right number, but I think there's around 38 or 42 guys that'll work postseason. That includes the wild card game, the divisional series, the LCS, and then the World Series umpires come out of the divisional series. So the guys that work the divisional series, there's 24 of them. 7 of those guys will then work the World Series. But to get to the postseason, there's all the data they have from your plate and base work. Sometimes there's a guy that's missed a significant part of the season because of an injury or whatever, so that might eliminate that person for this year. Obviously, we never go with a clean ticket. There's always guys injured. There may be a guy that was going to be in the postseason for sure, and then in the last month he pulled this or did this, and so he's out of action. So you have all that to deal with. And then you just put crews together, and it's not 100% just based on your scores and your plate work. There's an overall, consensus of your work. For example, let's say the top 7 guys on their plate scores were all guys with 10 years or less experience. Well, they're not going to put them all, they're not going to work the World Series. Okay. I mean, not all of them. I mean, some of them will, but because you have to have crew chiefs, you have to have experience, guys that have been around a little bit. So that's factored in that. I wish I could give you a definite answer that this is why, and this is that. I mean, there were years that I thought for sure I was going to get postseason, and I didn't. And there were a couple of years that wasn't sure if I get postseason, and I got the World Series for crying out loud. So, so sometimes it's a little bit of a mystery, but that's basically, to answer your question, that's what it is. And, you're talking about, obviously you see the crews as as the season goes, and there's guys that you feel are better than other guys, or that you're more comfortable with. But what's funny is kind of in reverse with an umpire. For example, I could see, Seattle 5 times all year. Every time I see him, a certain player in Seattle hits a home run or has a game-winning hit or something. I think this guy is a superstar. I mean, every time I see him, he's always doing, having a great series. He's a 230 hitter for the season, but I just happen to see him, just the few times I see him. So it's kind of like with a coach or a manager or a team. You see an umpire, a crew, and things go great, and there's some tough calls, and they're rowdy on top of it. And you think, God, this is a really good crew. But maybe they struggled somewhere else. But your thoughts on them are, or it goes the other way around. Pretty good crew, but when they had you guys, there were some things that came up, and whatever, and like a few guys got tossed, and all of a sudden you think this crew, they're a little shaky, and then you wonder, why are they working the playoffs? And when we see them, it seems like things aren't going well. So that's all objective. That's all kind of there. But the supervisors see you all year. They're evaluating all the video and scores and all that stuff, and then they come up with their list of guys.
Yeah, and that's one of the same things we always got told when I first started getting into scouting was, you might see a player on his best day or his worst day, so always go back in for the second look, reevaluate. And on that, how has the implementation of like TrackMan and Hawkeye, how has that helped or hurt the development of an umpire?
Well, in 2002 or 3 is when we had the first tracking evaluation system. It was called QuestTech. And it was an adjustment for everybody because, quite frankly, the strike zone had gotten real wide and real short. We were league wide in both leagues. Pitches that were, definitely outside were strikes and consistently called strikes. But anything almost nothing above the waist or just a tad bit higher was too high. I mean, the strike zone was kind of askew. It had developed into this thing that really wasn't what the rule book says. They redefined the strike zone in the rule book, and then when QuestTech came in, and then they wanted us to, to call the pitches. Now they had an evaluation system that tracked the pitches and all that stuff to the strike zone. Well, it was an adjustment. Again, I think it was 2000. I think it might have been 2003 when that really was in full effect. It was quite an adjustment for everybody. I mean, for the pitchers, for the hitters, and for the umpires, especially guys that have been around for a while, like myself, because now we'd established a kind of a zone that we have had for many years, and suddenly, it's different. And it took, Greg Maddox wasn't getting that pitch outside like he used to all the time, right? Okay, so he had to adjust. Hitters weren't used to, pitches that were a little bit higher than they're used to. And actually the defined zone actually made the low part of the zone, the hollow of the knee, just a tad bit, lower than what was being called. So there was an adjustment for everybody, and it was painful at times. Guys were frustrated because they're getting called out on strikes, or they're not getting strikes, or we were frustrated because I would get my QuestTech and I missed more pitches than I thought I did because I was still calling it too far outside or whatever. And it took a while for everybody to kind of get into that groove. Now, believe it or not, regardless of what you hear, the strike zone league wide is much more consistent umpire to umpire than what it was, like I said, before QuestTech and that kind of stuff. What kills us, quite frankly, guys, is the on-screen strike zone that these networks, that they put up, because they're not accurate. They certainly aren't adjusting for the high-low of each hitter,
Right.
in real time. Just a little sidebar here. When we get our scores, I work the plate, let's say on a Monday night. I don't get my evaluation scores and everything until Tuesday, because they have a technician after every game through, all the plate games that night. A couple technicians, but they go through and every pitch that is recorded as a miss, They go in and make sure the high-low lines are correct for that hitter. You know, it changes every hitter. It can change every pitch if a guy squares to bunt versus if he's swinging full away. You know, it's defined as your high lows are defined when you're about to attempt to, you know, strike at the ball. So that can change even with every pitch. But the point is to make sure it's as accurate as possible. That's done after the game's over manually. Well, obviously they're not doing that in real time on a broadcast, you know, and understandably, you know, why. But the problem is, and I showed this on my Facebook page a couple months ago, but it was St. Louis at the New York Mets. There was a 3-2 pitch that both telecasts, you know, the visitors had their telecast, the Mets had theirs. The on-screen strike zone, the Mets had the 3-2 pitch as ball 4, which is what the umpire called. The Cardinals had the 3-2 pitch as a strike 3, which they thought he missed it. It was a Mets hitter. That just shows you right there. It's the same exact pitch that two different telecasts have two different points of view or whatever. So the Cardinal people in St. Louis and watching that telecast going, "Oh my God, he missed that. Why have you missed that?" It's right there. The Mets people are going, "Oh, good call. That's ball 4." You know, so my point is this: they're not accurate 100%, but people see that. That's their reality. And so as far as they're concerned, that's it. So that's killed us. It really has, because the scores or the perception of a viewer watching that on-screen thing and the scores that internally that Major League Baseball has are different. An on-screen telecast thing that might have you missing, I don't know, 10 pitches, let's say. Well, the internal, the one that counts for us, has you missing 4 pitches because of how, you know, the barometers of how it's all tracked and all that stuff. So that's what's really killed us, is because obviously what people see is that's their reality, and that's 100% to them, 100% accurate.
This
what
is
I've
kind of
noticed
where I
from
want to
my
jump
end
in.
is on the minor league side specifically, because for me, the umpires of the big leagues, they're always going to be pretty consistent. You know what those zones are, they don't vary that much. Like, everyone complains about Angel Hernandez, but if you overlay Angel Hernandez's zone with another umpire, they're not really that drastically different at the end of the day. But what I've noticed on the minor league side is, you know, when I first got into the minor leagues for coaching was 2016. Not everyone had TrackMan yet. By 2017, every stadium had TrackMan. There was none that didn't have it. And by that time, there was so much information that the umpires were getting reports after going, "Hey, you missed 25% of the calls." And they go, "Oh, I'm way too wide on the zone," or "I go way too much arm side on a righty," whatever it may be. Right. And they started dialing it in quicker because they had that information and that feedback, right, where previously they did not. Right. So I think it's done a really good thing for it in general. But with that also, it's like, you know, I've had pitchers tell me, "Man, this guy's he's squeezing me back there. He's screwing me over. He's killing me." It's like, dude, he's a person. Do you not think that he's going to have some mistakes back there? Like, what is your margin for error? Do you throw a perfect pitch every time? Well, no. Well, then maybe give a little bit of grace because we're in rookie ball. Like, calm it down. Okay. Like, you're going to be okay.
Well, very, very, very true. One of the things about pitches, about missing pitches, or the perception of missing pitches, whatever the deal may be, is situational. You know, I have a first pitch of an at bat in the second inning of a 0-0 game, blah blah blah, and it's a close pitch, and I ball it, and they think, that same pitch with the tying run, in the seventh inning or something. All of a sudden, that same pitch, they really want it more, and they're going to say something. So sometimes it's situational where you may be correct, very close pitch, but you may be correct, but no one even bats an eye on one situation. That same pitch in a different situation, they're screaming, because they want it so bad, or a hitter, or whatever the case may be. But the problem is, guys, is that we go out as umpires with the mindset that we want to get every pitch and every play right. We don't go out and thinking, well, I think I'm just going to try to miss only 4 pitches today. I mean, that's not how you enter a game.
Yeah, no umpire is actively trying to hose you.
Right.
That's their job to not do that.
Right, and so and so that's your mindset. Rarely when you're working the plate, are you going to get 100% of your pitches right? Okay. But league wide for the umpires, staff wide, I think last year, I know the last year the year I retired was 97.2% staff wide for the entire season. That's
Wow.
thousands of pitches. Now somebody will say, well, it's not 100%. Well, no, it's not. But it's, it's not. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think if you polled fans, they'd say, oh, I don't know, league wide, they're probably about 80% or 85% or 90%. I mean, I don't know if they really understand how accurate for the most part we are. But again, if you're a fan, or if you're pulling, if you got a dog in the hunt, so to speak, and that close pitch at a pivotal time in an at bat, or a pivotal time in a game doesn't go your way, and and it's a borderline pitch, could maybe go either way, you're not happy, and I understand that. That's we're not out there to make people happy. We're out there to try to call the game as best as possible. I know that there must be frustrations, and especially you're talking about the minor leagues. These guys are coming out of school. They're good umpires. They're the best of the best of the school of that year, going into rookie ball and that kind of stuff. But very similar to the players, who are very skilled players, that's why they're there. They're still learning the game. They're learning the game on a professional level. Players, coaches, and many times managers, if they're young managers, are learning what they can and cannot say in arguments, or how they can approach umpires, and be okay. Umpires are learning when to eject guys, when not to eject. When I was a young umpire, I ejected guys before I should have, because I was, a quick trigger, or there were times that I should have run a guy and I didn't, because I took, so you're still learning the game at a professional level as you move up. So, the strike zone should be pretty consistent, but there's going to be times that you're just like a rookie pitcher or hitter. You're going to have a meltdown, or just, throwing 4 really good innings. The next inning, you can't find the play for whatever reason, so, those things happen. And if you can take a deep breath a little bit, and it's like Jordan said, hey, hey, he's human. He might miss a pitch. You might not throw a strike every time, whatever, just take a deep breath and move on.
I gotta jump in, because you're hitting. So the science of all of this, we need to discuss. Okay. This is a big deal. So my background is in biomechanics and exercise physiology, but I am really focused. What I'm most passionate about is injury prevention. It's not velocity enhancement. Okay. And my thought, and I've been looking at teams for a while, I've been talking to some teams, they've been asking me, why are we, what is causing our injuries? Right. And people ask me all the time, what's the biggest cause of pitching injuries? Well, it's pitching. Right.
Right.
So, one of the biggest issues I think that teams are plagued with is what I call pitch efficiency. How can we lower the amount of pitches per inning for each pitcher? And kind of like, now when I'm thinking about the umpire, and we're getting this information, right, from you, that there's certain pitches missed, and what can happen is that over time, those accumulate.
Sure.
Right. That's extra workload. One of the biggest questions I have to ask you is, I haven't paid a lot of attention to baseball, and I've been working really hard, and I don't focus on a lot of the current media, but what do you think is going to happen if this becomes a technological approach to calling strikes and balls, where, now this is done automated? What do you think is going to happen? Like, I don't know if this is going to actually help.
One thing I'll say on that, though, is I was watching a fall league game when they had the little buzzers and things on there. I saw a ball short hop the catcher, freaking wear the guy out in the bicep, and the umpire's like, ball, but it's like, actually that says it's a strike. So
yeah,
it's a strike. It was
like,
not a strike. So even that's going to screw it up from time to time, like
that's what I'm worried about, man. I'm worried about that. Like, I try to pay attention to a lot of Major League Baseball rule changes and things. They want to change the mound distance, and this affects mechanics. Sure. It affects a pitcher's repeatability. Then you put that on there too. And you said you're 97.2% league wide. If you move the mound back or move the mound different, now that's a different visual acuity.
and the umpires are going to perceive and see things differently
There's
as
going
well.
to be
That's going to
there's
change
gonna be
everything.
adjustment by everybody. Yeah.
It's frightening, and this is kind of why I'm so excited that we connected on LinkedIn and trying to, you know, extract this information, because this potential approach could potentially push the injury agenda to a place that could be very scary, by taking the calls out of the umpire's hands. And the other thing I do like too is the catchers can trick you guys in a sense and steal some strikes to lessen workload. And now that might be out of the equation. So
But
you know, what do you
let
think?
let me address this for you a little bit, because there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, umpires, our mindset is everything's a strike until it isn't. I mean, you're thinking strikes. You're not thinking balls. A baseball game flows much better when a pitcher's throwing strikes, which means the hitters are swinging the bat, which means the ball is being put in play, which means everybody's involved and the game flows. It's you know, similar to a basketball game when nobody can make a shot and you have all these rebounding fouls and stuff. You know, but if they're making shots down, you know, I mean, that game usually flows pretty well. Same thing with baseball. And you know, no one wants to go to a game to watch a bunch of guys throw balls and walk. That's not exciting. So an umpire's mindset is, or should be certainly, and a lot of times in amateur levels when I do these clinics and stuff, it's the obvious. It's like you know, they have a postage stamp. It's like, dude, think strikes. Everything's a strike until it isn't a strike. Don't go the opposite. Everything is a ball till it is a strike. That's not the way you want to do it. So that means those borderline calls, those calls that can go either way, and you have a ton of them, you know, usually during the game and also through the course of a season. My mindset was always, you know, ball. Yeah, I could have called that strike. Well, then I should have called it strike. If I could have called it, I should have. Right? I mean, it's a borderline. But now you're talking about a catcher. A catcher is helping. You know, I want to. I might be the minority on this opinion, but I think framing is overrated. Okay, but I'm not saying that receiving the ball isn't overrated. And let me tell you the difference. One of the best receivers I had in my career, it was early in my career, was Bob Boone. Bob Boone was a catcher who made everything look good. I swear to God. I mean, he had a way of massaging, and that's the word I like to use, massaging the pitch to where that borderline pitch, that pitch is maybe a little bit outside. The way he softly just caught that and didn't make a big deal out of it, but just massage it. He made everything look good. What happens nowadays, a lot of times, these guys will take a pitch and they'll be a little bit more jerky with it, or you know, with trying to kind of make that frame where Boone and other guys that they'd stick it and they you know, they'd stick it to where they don't jerk it over or something. They just kind of stick it and massage it. You know, it's hard to explain, but when you see it, it just makes everything look good.
You know it when you see it.
Exactly. And the what I see with and you know, some of these guys are outstanding at doing that. Others not so much. But what it tells an umpire, when you have a tough borderline outside pitch, and I see the catcher doing this, it's telling me that you think it's out. Because you're trying to, you know, show me or trick me to think that it's on the plate. A lot of times, if you just catch it, just stick the pitch. It's a borderline, you know, you're thinking strikes, you're going to probably get it. But when you do that, it gives that jerky or that, you know, that would an umpire's good timing, boom, and it tells me, you're telling me you had it outside, you know, and that I think you're not helping your pitcher at all.
I want to give a real world example on that. Oh, go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just going to say a good receiver. I don't, you know, you're a pitching coach. If you have a catcher that's not a good receiver, you've got to be screaming, can somebody else please catch? Because it does make a difference on how on those close pitches, how it may be, you know, end up a strike instead of a ball. But those guys that can do it and do it very not almost nonchalant, very very strong wrists and stuff where they're just that low pitch, they don't come down, you know, down here, they stick that thing here and it's the same height, but he makes it look, you know, he dresses that ball and makes it much look like it caught the bottom of the zone instead of one that looks like, you know, he didn't. I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, there are good receivers. Yes, they kind of massage and make those close pitches look good. But maybe we're talking semantics here, but sometimes I think this framing thing is overrated to the point where, oh, he framed that, or, when a guy jerks a little bit or makes that kind of move that's not as smooth and like a Bob Boone used to do, that's just telling me you didn't like that pitch either. You think it's outside. Just stick it, and you're probably going to get it.
Yeah, to give a real world example on that, I remember, I'm not going to use names because Ryan, you're going to know who I'm talking about anyways. But when I was, I think it was the year I had so many different titles. I think my title that year was like assistant programs coordinator. So I was traveling to affiliates, doing all this stuff, spending a little bit of time in the big leagues. And with our catching coordinator at the time, me and him were both in AA on the same trip. And we're playing a specific org. I'm not going to say which org it was because they're avid armchair users. I'm not going to say anything about them, but that narrows it down to roughly all 30 teams are using it to some extent. So there you have it. But we're watching their guys catch, and their catches are snapping the ball around. They're winging the thing around.
Right.
And then our catching coach is, hey, just get in there and catch the ball. And I'm like, so what's the big difference here? I was like, I know that I don't like the way that catching looks. I like the way that ours looks, but I don't like the way theirs looks. And he goes, let's pull some numbers. So me and him, we went into the clubhouse. We sat down because we could watch it on MILB TV. We're pulling numbers up. We're looking at this org's positive strikes, negative strikes. In the minor leagues, they're killing it. They're really snappy and aggressive. But then when they get to the big leagues, all of a sudden it's all this big, huge negative shift. He's like, that big aggressive thing works on inexperienced umpires that are still learning. But as you get to the higher levels, you see those numbers start dwindling down. And it is about how soft you can be. How calm can you be?
Right.
Even if that ball's off by an inch, if you're consistently calm and the pitcher's around the zone, the pitcher's got to be around the zone.
Right.
It's going to sway that thing in the way, just like you're saying. It makes it look a little bit better because you're thinking strike.
Right.
This guy's aggressive and winging his arms around. It's very hard for someone to go, hey, I'm going to side with that guy when he's, flipping out behind the plate, So I remember having that conversation. You know who I'm talking about, Ryan. But I always tried to plan my trips with him and a couple other guys to always be in the same cities at the same time because I'm going to learn something about a position that I'm not familiar with.
Right.
Yeah. See, sorry,
Right.
I don't mean to jump in because it's amazing to talk to an umpire to see these things. Is that there's now different schools of thought in catching where it used to be like you want to catch things with an L, right?
Mm-hmm.
Catchers are now starting to do a double hinge. You were taught to never put your thumb down. You break your thumb, right? But now, when the pitch is, especially kind of on the outside, right? That's probably, let's say it's a right-handed batter and it's a right-handed pitcher. He's going to the lower bottom corner. That's a tough one for you to call, right? Because you're on the closest side of the batter. So I kept asking, some catching guys, and I said, on that pitch that's a down and away pitch, and you want to steal that strike, what's the approach? Because they don't teach, so the thumb position, they don't really teach this action because that's what you're talking about. You're catching the mitt. But what they're teaching is something called a double hinge, where the wrist, so it gets at the elbow bends and the wrist bends to pull it into the body. But what you're talking about, I'm wondering, because, umpires, you're going to have pretty good peripheral vision that you actually might see, I don't know, potentially as the ball's coming in, some kind of motion with the arm rather than just catching it, least motion.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is we're tracking the baseball, obviously. But, again, if a catcher can present the pitch, you had just said something about you want to steal that strike. I think you said, or
yeah, we call people on the inside, they call it catcher extra strikes or catcher stolen strikes, because they think you guys are perfect, right? So we're trying to, take it away from you.
Yeah, like I'd hate to be a fly on the wall in some of those meetings talking about us. I mean, okay, I'm just saying, but no, but and again, Sal Fasano. Do you guys know Sal?
I know Sal very well.
With
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, we had him when I was with the Angels. He was our AA manager.
One of the best catchers to work behind because he made everything look good. Sal had he was in the same vein as Boone when I was talking about earlier. When Sal was playing, and some of those years, he was the number 2 catcher, so you'd only get him maybe on a Sunday day game or whatever. And you were thrilled when you got him as a play guy. You were happy as hell because here's a guy. First of all, he's a good guy, and somebody you could talk to, and not, he's not going to shove stuff up stuff. But but he's also a very good receiver, and I would think every pitcher would want to throw to him, in my experience, because of, and any good, I don't care who it is. If it's a good receiver that can massage those close pitches and make those pitches, those borderline pitches, look good and present them in a positive way, I would think any pitcher would want him. Conversely, when you have a guy that, not to name names, but there's some guys that I've had in the big leagues that, they were pretty good hitters, not the greatest receivers in the world, right? And I'm not sure how many, what kind of a detriment that was to their pitching staff over the course of the season because of his catching skills, his receiving skills, or whatever. I mean, it makes a difference. I don't want to say that, I hate the word framing. I just hate that word because the connotation is like, oh gosh, I don't know where it's at. I guess you but yes, you can. You can, over the course of a game, if a guy throws, 100 pitches, and let's say there's 7 of them that are that, borderline outside corner or whatever. And if you got a good receiver, you might get all 7 of them. If you got a not so good receiver, you may not get any of them, or you may only get 3 of them or so, and of course, as you guys know, that could be a big difference depending on when that pitch is. So, it does make a difference when you have a receiver that can, and by the way, if you see Sal, tell him hello. Good guy.
2 things on that. When you were saying about Sal, just real quick, but I know we got to wrap it up, Bart, but it's got to be good to throw to Sal because he's like this big. He's giant. He's one of the biggest people I've ever seen in my life.
He protects
big
me.
Old mustache, But then just to touch on that, we've had him on here before. He's the guy who mentored me with Tom House. I don't know if you ever ran into him as a coach in the coaching side of it or not, but he always said there's catchers that can sometimes hit, and then there's hitters who can wear catcher's gear. So it's like there's those 2 things that happen when you get to the big leagues, but nobody does it both. Right.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. But yeah, and you're talking about Sal's a big guy, but you know what? He got down. You could see the ball really well with Sal.
He would get in there and catch pens when in spring training, and he'd get in there. This giant guy, he'd have his butt on the ground. It was impressive. To see.
He again, just because he was a big guy. Some big guys are tough to see just because they're kind of hulky the way they get down. I'm so old. I had Carlton Fisk. Carlton was a huge dude. Okay, but he got down really well. I mean, you could actually see the ball, pretty decently with him. So it makes a difference for sure.
Well, Dale, I'm very interested in your book. There's lots of books out there by players and coaches and analysts, but I don't know of any by an umpire. Why don't you give us a little details of the title, a little bit about it, and where we can find it?
Well, it came out technically May 1st, although it was out by late March. People were getting the copies of it. It's called The Umpire is Out. It's a memoir of my 37 years in professional baseball, 5 in the minor leagues and the 32 in the major leagues. Some pretty funny stories, both minor and major league stories, kind of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of an umpire's life and how we see things and approach things and that kind of stuff. It's also a personal journey of mine. I was the first active male official in the Big 5 sports to come out as gay in 2014. But I went full circle because when I entered baseball in 1981 was my first year after umpire school. I was actively trying to make sure baseball didn't know who I really was, because obviously I wanted to get promoted and to try to get to the big leagues. But also I came out literally, or not didn't come out, but I started my professional baseball career 2 weeks after the first reported cases of AIDS in the 80s, which of course at the time they didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to spread. There was a lot of fear and stuff. And so I had to, not only was I not wanting anyone to know in baseball I was gay because I thought it would affect my possibility of moving up, but now I was also thinking if someone found out I was gay, they wouldn't even want to work with me. I mean, because in the minor leagues, you're traveling together, you're working together, you're in the same hotel, all that kind of stuff. So it talks about how my progression through the minor leagues and the big leagues and at where I go full circle. And in 2014, I actually come out publicly and how that came full circle. So, but some great baseball stories. That's good. The feedback's been good. And it was a lot of fun. I've obviously never written a book before. It was a lot of fun. Rob Nyer helped me. He's an author that's written a few baseball books. He's a baseball writer for 20 plus years at Fox, ESPN. So I'm real happy with it. I hope people pick it up and enjoy it. My website, umpiredalescott.com, has all the information on how to get the book and a bunch of other stuff that I've done. So anyway, that's the way to do it.
It's pretty awesome. I mean, you must love the game to get into umpiring, but then to turn around after all those years and write a book, you must still love the game more than ever.
Yeah, and it was writing it was interesting because every chapter I write about World Series. I've had 3 World Series, playoffs. I write about our union issues in '99 when our union blew up. Self-inflicted wound there. But every chapter, everything I was writing about, it took me back, right back to when I was doing it and the emotions and the thoughts that were happening. So it was really kind of cathartic for me after a long career to do that and kind of go back over it. But it was a lot of fun. I've gotten, like I said, some great feedback, and hopefully people will pick it up and enjoy it. And I just found out, hopefully, supposedly we just did the deal. There'll be an audiobook coming out, and I'll be the narrator for it, since I
Very
spent
cool.
5 years in radio, so I know how to do that.
That's awesome. Dale, this has been a pleasure. Definitely. I loved it. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Anytime, guys.
Yep. Until next time, take care.